The Jewish man ruthlessly pushed his son away. Then he quickly ran out from under the bridge, deliberately drawing the attention of the German soldiers only to give his son a slim chance to escape from behind. However, the man was cruelly killed by the Germans, paying for it with his precious life. 8-year-old Jurek, though he narrowly escaped the clutches of the Nazis, was only at the beginning of his perilous journey as a Jewish fugitive. Having lost his father's protection, he was left homeless and utterly alone. Shivering in the freezing cold, Jurek timidly sneaked into a farmhouse, trying to steal a coat while the man inside wasn't looking to keep himself warm. Unfortunately, his actions were discovered. The man pounced on him like a hungry wolf, grabbed him, and viciously punched Jurek, knocking him hard to the ground. Then, as if possessed, the man picked up a stick and began mercilessly beating Jurek's frail body. He showed no mercy despite Jurek being just a child. After finishing the beating and still not satisfied, he turned back into the house to fetch a rope, intending to tie Jurek up and hand him over to the Germans for a reward. Enduring the searing pain, Jurek hurriedly grabbed the coat and fled in panic, narrowly escaping death once again. After reaching the forest, Jurek wrapped his toes with pieces of rag to prevent frostbite. Then, stumbling through the snow, he plunged deeper into the woods only to be shocked when he saw a German vehicle driving toward him. Terrified, Jurek dropped flat to the ground to hide, realizing even the forest wasn't truly safe. By now, the blizzard had grown even fiercer, and Jurek hastily used a few branches to build a crude shelter, hoping to survive the night. But those few fragile branches were useless against the bitter cold. They could not shield him from the piercing wind. He could only curl up under the shelter, trembling violently, feeling his life slipping away. Just as he was about to give up, his father's voice suddenly echoed in his mind. Never give up. Gritting his teeth, Jurek pressed on through the snowstorm because if he stopped, he would surely freeze to death in the forest. Step by step, he trudged forward against the raging blizzard, the icy wind lashing at his face like a whip, making it almost impossible to lift his head. Just when he thought he would die in that frozen wilderness, a miracle appeared. Jurek suddenly saw a village ahead. It was like a ray of light in the darkness, the hope of survival. Summoning the last of his strength, Jurek dragged himself toward the door, but utterly exhausted, he finally collapsed in the snow. Fortunately, fate finally smiled upon him, as a Polish woman stepped out of her house. When Jurek opened his eyes again, he found himself lying on a warm and comfortable bed. Time had quietly slipped away while he was unconscious. He had been asleep for 3 days. The woman was a devout Christian, whose husband and son had joined the Polish resistance, bravely fighting the German army for their country's freedom. She cared for Jurek with great kindness, not only slaughtering a chicken to help him regain his strength, but also teaching him how to beg for food as a Christian believer. Though her home was simple and modest, it was filled with love and warmth. On Christmas Day, this kind woman prepared a special gift for Jurek, a pair of shoes that once belonged to her son. Overjoyed, Jurek hugged the woman tightly, his heart overflowing with gratitude for her warmth and compassion. However, good times are always fleeting, disappearing as quickly as shooting stars. The next morning, the woman opened her door as usual to fetch some firewood for cooking, but suddenly, she froze in fear. There were many unfamiliar footprints in the snow outside. Her heart leapt to her throat, and in a panic, she rushed back to the room and shook Jurek awake. With a look of urgency on her face, she told him that the place was no longer safe, and he had to leave immediately. Before he left, the woman took off her cherished cross necklace and gave it to Jurek, praying sincerely for his safety and protection. Though both were reluctant and heavy-hearted, they had no choice but to say a sorrowful goodbye. Once again, Jurek set out on a journey full of hardship and danger. When he had nowhere else to go, he remembered the woman's lesson on how to beg. Although he was turned away many times, his persistence finally paid off when he met a kind-hearted farmer. The farmer, seeing that he was just a child, took pity on him and decided to take him in. Jurek told the farmer about his tragic past, earning their sympathy and compassion. Grateful for their kindness, Jurek never took their help for granted. He worked hard during the day and slept curled up in the barn at night. Even though his living conditions were rough, he never complained, keeping hope alive in his heart. His determination and diligence deeply moved the farmer's family, who soon treated him as one of their own. One day, while helping the farmer exercise his horses, Jurek stumbled upon an injured stray dog. The dog limped weakly, his eyes filled with pain and helplessness. Seeing him, Jurek felt as if he were looking at himself in a mirror, and with compassion, he decided to take the poor creature in. Back home, Jurek carefully cleaned and bandaged the dog's wounds, and under his attentive care, the dog slowly recovered. The two became inseparable companions, sharing countless moments of joy together. But just like before, happiness never lasted long. One day, while Jurek was happily playing with some local boys, one of them suddenly noticed that he had been in isolation before. Even worse, the boy threatened to report him to the German soldiers. To avoid bringing trouble to the farmer's family, Jurek was forced to run away once again, embarking on another lonely escape. Yet this time, he was not alone. His loyal dog stayed by his side. Together, they hid deep in the forest, relying on each other to survive in this dangerous and uncertain world. At night, Jurek and his dog huddled together, finding warmth and comfort in each other's presence. The next morning, starving and desperate, Jurek spotted some wild ducks swimming in the river. He tried again and again to catch one but failed despite all his effort. Then, without hesitation, the dog leapt into the water and caught one for him. That night, they finally got to enjoy the delicious taste of wild duck. The next morning, while Jurek was still asleep, the dog suddenly sensed danger in the air. It barked furiously and sprinted away. And in the next instant, a gunshot shattered the stillness of the forest. Jurek's heart sank, and he immediately ran toward the sound. When he finally found his dog, he was devastated to see it lying there, barely breathing. It turned out that a commander from the Polish resistance had accidentally shot the dog. The commander urged Jurek to leave right away, warning him that the German troops had already entered the forest. The dog's death hit Jurek like a thunderbolt on a clear day, leaving him crushed by grief. He wept bitterly as he buried his only friend, his heart filled with unbearable sorrow and loneliness. Once again, Jurek was forced to continue his journey alone. Along the way, he came across a couple riding in a horse-drawn carriage. The woman told him that she could find him a job and help him with food and shelter. Overjoyed, Jurek thought he had finally met kind-hearted people, so he got into their carriage without any hesitation. But fate, once again, played a cruel trick on him. When he woke up, night had already fallen, and what he saw left him in utter shock. He was inside a German military base. The couple had betrayed him to the German officers in exchange for a reward. Like grabbing a small animal, the officer roughly dragged Jurek into a basement. Then, with a hard shove, he threw Jurek into a cell, leaving him to face endless darkness. Suddenly, from the next cell came horrifying sounds of someone being beaten. Terrified, Jurek covered his ears tightly, trying desperately to block out the screams. Not long after, it was his turn. The soldiers dragged him roughly to the commander's office, his heart pounding with fear. The commander demanded to know if Jurek was Jewish, but Jurek firmly denied it. The commander didn't believe him in anger. He slapped Jurek across the face, lifted him by his collar, and slammed him against the wall, shouting at him to tell the truth about where he came from. Trying to stay calm, Jurek spoke quickly, repeating the story he had prepared, doing everything he could to prove he wasn't Jewish. Although his answers seemed convincing, the commander suddenly gave an unexpected order. He told Jurek to take off his pants. This abrupt demand pushed Jurek into a desperate corner. When Jurek hesitated for just a moment, the commander impatiently yanked his pants down, and Jurek was instantly exposed. With no way to defend himself, the commander began questioning him about his circumcision. Jurek's heart tightened, but he tried to stay calm, claiming it was the result of a medical operation due to an infection. The commander clearly didn't believe this explanation and was determined to send Jurek to a concentration camp, a place of suffering and despair. Just then, the guard dogs nearby began barking uncontrollably. Annoyed by the noise, the commander stormed over to silence them. At that very moment, Jurek noticed a key lying on the ground and instantly came up with a plan to escape. When the commander turned back, he realized Jurek had vanished and the door to the warehouse stood wide open. Furious, the commander drew his pistol and charged into the warehouse. But to his shock, Jurek was hiding right behind the door. The boy slammed it shut and locked it, then bolted away as fast as he could. Realizing he'd been outsmarted, the commander fired several shots at the door, the loud gunfire echoing through the base and alerting the guards. Panicked, Jurek scrambled onto a nearby vehicle, then leapt onto the roof. With all his strength, he jumped from the roof into the dense forest, running through the hail of bullets. The German soldiers were furious. They couldn't believe they had been fooled by a child, and their pride burned with anger. They mobilized all their men, swearing to capture Jurek at any cost. Desperate, Jurek dove into a river and hid beneath a large tree. The soldiers spread out across the bridge like a pack of wolves on the hunt, searching for any trace of him. Soaked and shivering, Jurek tried to stay silent in the freezing water. Then, to his horror, he saw the soldiers on the opposite bank. They had brought dogs, and the hounds were already closing in. Holding his breath, Jurek climbed quietly out of the river and sprinted deep into the woods, but the dog's sharp sense of smell gave him no chance to rest. The soldiers followed closely behind, guided by the barking of their hounds. Gasping for breath, Jurek knew he couldn't outrun them forever. Thinking quickly, he dove into a foul-smelling swamp, hoping it would hide his scent. Just when Jurek thought he had finally escaped danger, a chilling bark echoed from the distance. Terrified, he hid behind a fallen tree submerged in the water, his heart pounding as the German soldiers appeared right before his eyes. It seemed there was no way out this time, but when the dogs jumped into the water, they couldn't pick up Jurek's scent at all. The officer stared suspiciously at the calm surface of the water but saw nothing unusual. Still unwilling to give up, the soldiers fired several rounds into the water before leaving reluctantly. Jurek held his breath, afraid to make even the slightest sound. Having narrowly escaped death once again, Jurek stumbled upon a farm surrounded by golden waves of wheat. There, he met a kind man named Powell, who was moved by the boy's pitiful condition and took him back to the estate, pleading with the lady of the house to let Jurek stay. But at that very moment, a German officer stepped out of the house, startling Jurek completely. To his dismay, the officer turned out to be the woman's boyfriend. Jurek's heart sank, certain that his luck had finally run out. Yet, to his astonishment, the officer didn't harm him. Instead, he offered Jurek to the woman as a gift. For Jurek, this unexpected turn of events felt like a small miracle. From that day on, he stayed and worked on the farm, laboring hard every day. Though life remained difficult, he felt a sense of peace and stability he had never known before. But misfortune always came without warning. One day, while feeding the horses, Jurek's hand got caught in the spinning wheel after one of the horses suddenly panicked. The excruciating pain made him cry out in agony, and within seconds, his once perfect hand was horribly mangled. He was rushed to the hospital, but when the doctor prepared for surgery, he suddenly froze in shock. The boy was Jewish. The doctor coldly refused to operate. Unwilling to risk his position for the boy's sake, the lady of the house begged desperately, even reminding the doctor of her connections with the German officers, but he remained unmoved. Jurek was left alone in the hospital corridor, abandoned and helpless. A kind-hearted nurse couldn't bear to see him suffer and secretly gave him an injection to ease his pain. Jurek endured the night in unbearable agony, lying weakly on the cold floor. The next morning, the hospital director arrived and was horrified to find the boy on the verge of death. Realizing the urgency, he immediately ordered that Jurek be taken to surgery and personally arranged the operation. The director angrily rebuked the doctor who had refused treatment the day before, saying that if Jurek had received care sooner, his hand could have been saved now. All they could do was fight to keep him alive. After the operation, Jurek miraculously survived, but the tragedy was that he had lost his right hand forever. Months of painful recovery followed, and though his body healed, his heart remained broken. When he looked at his reflection in the mirror, staring at his incomplete body, a wave of despair washed over him. Tears streamed uncontrollably down his face, his chest aching with indescribable sorrow. Losing his right hand made him feel useless, trapped in hopelessness and confusion. Often in his dreams, he would see his mother again, and each time he woke, the pain of loss grew heavier. He became withdrawn and irritable, lashing out at those around him for no reason. Only when the lady of the house and Powell came to visit did a faint smile return to his face. During his stay at the hospital, Jurek met an elderly man who told him, "Even though I've lost a leg, I can still dance." Those words were like a gentle spring breeze, clearing away the darkness in Jurek's heart. Slowly, he began to let go of his pain, finding new strength and optimism, but fate still refused to show him mercy. One day, Powell rushed into the hospital, his face pale with fear. He told Jurek that they had to escape immediately. The German officer in charge had been replaced, and no one could protect him anymore. As they hastily packed their belongings, the sound of boots echoed from the entrance. The German soldiers had already arrived. It turned out that the same cold-hearted doctor who once refused to operate on Jurek had betrayed him to the authorities. Luckily, Jurek and Powell managed to flee through the back door just in time, narrowly escaping capture once again. Powell led Jurek to the riverbank and told him to take a small boat downstream to find a safe place where he could hide. After a heartfelt farewell, Jurek once again set off on the road of escape, living each day in fear, sleeping outdoors, and scavenging for survival. He begged for food from village to village, but luck was not on his side this time. He got nothing. Starving and exhausted, Jurek dug through a field, picking up stray potatoes just to fill his stomach. But when he lifted his head, he froze in terror. A German military truck was approaching. Panic surged through him, and he immediately turned and ran. The Germans, however, weren't about to let him go so easily. Jurek sprinted into the forest, desperate and breathless, until he suddenly recognized a familiar house. It was the home of the Polish woman who had once saved his life. Moments later, the German soldiers arrived and banged fiercely on her door. The officer demanded she hand over the one-armed Jewish boy, but the woman firmly denied ever seeing him. Furious, the soldiers stormed inside, overturning furniture and searching every corner. When they found nothing, the officer's rage exploded. He struck the woman hard across the face, sending her crashing to the floor. Then one of the soldiers noticed a cellar entrance, and the woman's heart instantly raced with dread. The soldier climbed down into the cellar with his pistol ready, searching every inch, but again, they found nothing. In their madness, the Germans refused to stop. They set fire to the woman's house, and soon the entire village was engulfed in flames. Before leaving, they looted everything of value and then drove away arrogantly, leaving only destruction behind. When the soldiers were finally gone, the woman rushed back, frantically trying to put out the fire. She ran to the cellar, shouting Jurek's name over and over, but there was no reply. Desperate, she clawed at the dirt, pulling up the floorboards, and to her immense relief, she found Jurek alive and unharmed. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she hugged him tightly. Overwhelmed with emotion, they hid behind the ruins of the burned house, watching the village reduced to ashes. Jurek was consumed with guilt, realizing that it was his presence that had brought disaster upon them. But the woman did not blame him. Instead, she urged him to leave quickly. Now she had lost everything and could no longer offer him any help. Following her directions, Jurek set out toward the rising sun, for the Soviet army was advancing from the east. His days on the run grew even harsher. He begged for food, did odd jobs to survive, and pressed on relentlessly, not daring to rest for even a moment. He knew that only by moving forward could he escape the Germans' grasp and cling to the faint hope of survival. After countless hardships and a long, grueling journey, Jurek finally encountered the Soviet troops. He had made it safely into Soviet territory. There, he met a kind, cheerful young girl who welcomed him warmly. With nowhere else to go, Jurek followed her home. Her father, a humble and kind blacksmith, took pity on the boy and offered him shelter, even teaching him the craft of metalworking. For the first time in years, Jurek was safe. He was deeply grateful and worked hard every day, earning the love and trust of the family, who treated him as one of their own. Time flew by, and soon spring of 1945 arrived. The war was finally over. People poured into the streets, raising their glasses to celebrate the long-awaited peace. Overjoyed, Jurek climbed up to the bell tower and rang the bell, its sound echoing across the village. Carrying a message of hope and freedom, Jurek thought he could finally live a peaceful life. But fate once again shattered his calm. One day, an unexpected visitor arrived. A neighbor had reported him for being Jewish. A young man in a suit appeared at the door, holding government papers, and said he was there to take Jurek away. He was from a Jewish orphanage in Warsaw, tasked with finding children who had been separated from their families during the war. Jurek desperately denied being Jewish, but the man used his final proof. He demanded that Jurek remove his pants. Jurek froze in panic, and in desperation, he repeated the old lie that it was a surgery due to infection, but that only confirmed the truth he wanted to hide. In the end, the man took him away, and the blacksmith's family could do nothing to stop it, for the man carried official government orders. Back at the orphanage, Jurek received an education, studying diligently. Through his intelligence and perseverance, he was eventually admitted to a university. Years passed in the blink of an eye. Now an elderly man with silver hair, Jurek lives surrounded by his children and grandchildren, enjoying the peace he once could only dream of. Looking back on his extraordinary life, Jurek is filled with emotion. He survived war, loss, and endless hardship. Yet through it all, he never gave up his hope for life, nor his pursuit of freedom.